and get started. It looks like most of you are here. I appreciate your willingness to take time this evening to help formulate the district's budget for 2013-2014. I firmly believe that the more people we have involved in the process, the better product we have as far as a budget for next year. So thank you for taking time to meet this evening. You should have a notebook in front of you with the list. It has quite a bit of information for the meeting tonight. In the beginning of the book is the agenda for the evening. We plan to have a light supper around 6:30, and then there will be a break around 8:15. If you need to get up to get a drink or go to the restroom, feel free to do so at any time. You can come and go as you want. We have water and tea in the back corner here, and then the restroom is located down the hallway, just straight down the hallway and a little bit to the left. The majority of the evening will be spent listening to 15 different program committees present their budget proposals for next year. Each committee was charged with presenting a 98% and a 100% budget. At the end of the meeting, you will be charged with the responsibility of prioritizing all of the proposals that you listen to tonight in the likely event that budget cuts will need to be made for next year. There's quite a bit of other information in the front of the notebook, and I'm not going to go over all of that at this point in time, but if you look through it, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me if you have any questions regarding it. There's lots of information regarding the members of the group that's meeting tonight, enrollment information, prior information as far as how programs were funded, etc. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Rick Ata, and he has just a few words to say.
Thank you. Probably some of my comments are going to be to reiterate a little bit of what Kathleen had to say, but I too want to thank you for giving of your time to come and participate in this very important activity. And each year, over the last 4 or 5 years since the economic, actually 3 or 4 years since the economic downturn, I think this meeting has become more and more important. Because it's a lot of fun to have money and be able to do the things that you want to do for our kids and our community. It's not so much fun when you don't. And we're at a time where over the last 3 or 4 years where we've had less and less resources to deal with to support our kids, support our teachers, so on and so forth. And that's the unfortunate part of it. I'd like to begin here, though, briefly, and I don't know if you can read or not, but a lot of people in our community don't know where our revenue comes from in the district. Basically, if you look at this bar graph at the bottom here, and you probably can't see it, but the most of our funds, 61%, come from state aid. And if you have one of those blue notebooks, you can open that up and you can see it very clearly there, the chart that I'm referring to. Secondly, it's local taxes. About 16% come from local taxes. You and I, the taxes that we pay, on our homes, on our cars, so on and so forth. About 11% comes from the federal government. Next, 7.8% comes from cash balances, the carryover that we have at the end of the year that we carry over. A lot of people don't know this, but our state money comes in a little later in the summertime, but we still have bills that have to be paid, so you have to have cash balances in order to pay those bills, in order to make sure the teachers get paid and everybody gets paid that's on a salary, so on and so forth. in the summertime. So those cash balances are also there for emergency type situations that may come about that are not or cannot be budgeted for. Next, about 1% is a reimbursement that we get from Russell Child Development. A lot of people don't know this, but the payroll for Russell Child Development runs through the school district, and this helps them with the grant that they receive. So we have a partnership with them that I think benefits them and benefits the district as well. Next, less than 1% has to do with food service meal charges. Our food service, you'll notice that they're not one of the 15 programs that you'll be looking at this evening, because our food service department runs independently, and it runs in the black. It runs on a profit basis. The only expenses the district has for our food service is to buy major pieces of equipment. So they're not one of the 15 programs that you'll be considering this evening. And the last area there of about $594,000, or less than 1%, is in the area of miscellaneous. And some examples of what miscellaneous might be would be things like activity fees, student activity fees, Medicaid funds. Those sorts of things would be in that miscellaneous category. But I think the main point here is that over 60% of our revenue comes from the state. And our state legislators, over 52% of the state's budget comes to public schools. So it lets you know how important our state legislators are to K-12 funding. So when they cut or reduce what they give us, it leaves us no choice but to have a meeting like this in program budgeting, where we're looking at reducing the services or making cuts, or reducing the services that we do for our kids. The other option we have is that the Board of Education, we have a local option budget, and that local option budget can be raised to a certain degree, and that basically is raising your local property taxes, is what that's doing. So the board in the past has operated where with an economic downturn, we try to make cuts as well as look at an additional revenue source, which would be raising the local option budget. But the Board of Education takes that very seriously. We've had to do that a couple of times here in the last couple of years. Okay, with that said, I'd like to introduce the Board of Education members that are here this evening, that are spread out through the audience. First, Mark Rood. I don't believe Alex Wallace is able to be here this evening. Tim Cruz will be here at 6:30. He's in transit from Topeka. That boy makes more trips to Topeka than our legislators, I think, due to his job. So, but he'll be back with us, and he's coming back, I think, special for this meeting, and then going back to Topeka. Laura Bors, don't believe she could be here right at this moment. She'll be here later. Jean Clifford, President of the Board. Gloria Hopkins. And Tom Blackburn. One last thing I want to mention to you this evening is we have an election coming up next week. We have 3 Board of Education openings. And we have with us this evening the 4 candidates that are running for the Board of Education, and I want to introduce them to you. Gloria Hopkins, Jean Clifford, Laura Bors is not here right now, and then I've invited Anthony Espino. Anthony, would you stand, please, and so everybody can see you, and if you don't know you, but thank you for running for the school board, and good luck to you. And good luck to all 4 of you. I believe it's tomorrow night. Is that correct? There's going to be a forum held by the city, and it starts at 7 o'clock. And it'll be on Channel 8, and certainly it will be reported in the newspaper. And if you have read today's telegram, there's an article in there about the 4 candidates. So please vote. We've got some folks running for the city commission, also the college trustees. So please get out and vote for the person that you, or people that you think will do the best job. These 7 school board members, they don't get paid 1 dime. It's all volunteer. But they make some very important decisions, and then during these economic times, those decisions are extremely important. So I applaud them for giving up their time to participate in the process of managing over a $90 million budget. When you add this all up, it totals up to be $93 million, roughly. So an awesome responsibility. I believe we are the largest employer in Garden City, second largest only to Tyson and Finney County. So a major corporation. And your input this evening is critical to helping the board make some very important decisions. But thank you again for your time. There are no bad questions. So if you have a question that comes to mind, make sure that you ask it. Any questions of me before we begin?
Could you recognize the parents and public representatives since they're taking their time out to be here today?
Absolutely. Anybody that's a non-employee of the school district and a parent in our community, would you stand? Thank you.
Okay, before we get started, I'll be real brief, but I wanted to kind of give you an idea of where we're at with the budget for next year. There's some things we do know, and then there's lots of other things we don't know at this time. So when we get done with the process at the end of the evening or tomorrow, we'll have a prioritized list, but we don't know how far down on the list we'll have to go. For next year, the legislature, as Dr. Athey said, they determine what the per pupil funding is. And as far as we know right now, there will be no change, no increase, or no decrease in the amount that we get funded for next year. This year we had an increase in enrollment. Our enrollment stayed pretty much the same, but we get additional funding for weighting of students, and transportation weighting increased quite a bit this year. So because of that, we have an increase in our budget for this current year, which will help us next year. If I have a red, black is good, red is not so good. We know that we're going to have an increase in our property insurance. Our rates have gone up, and then we also have the additional cost of insuring the new high school. We have been told by the city that we will have an increase in utilities of about 10%, which is about $150,000 for next year. Due to the new high school, we have an increase in custodial supplies. We also have an increase in the amount that we have to pay for technology maintenance. This is a wonderful facility, and there's lots of new wonderful technology in this building, but there's maintenance contracts that go along with that. We did add one new teaching position this year. It was a SPED position. Those are the things that we know about. Now I'm going to kind of give a list of things we don't know. We don't know how far down we'll go on our program budgeting cuts. All of the groups have been asked to do a 2%. If we do a 1% cut, that equals $600,000. So 2% would be 1.2 million. We don't know if we'll have an increase or decrease in enrollment next year, but for right now, we're planning on no change. We had, for our workers' comp insurance, our usage or our experience rating over the last couple of years has, we've done better. We have fewer accidents and fewer severe accidents. So our experience rating went down significantly this year, which is good. We're anticipating a decrease in our workers' comp insurance for next year. We can always, in order to help out our general fund, we have the ability to increase our local option budget. So we can increase it. If we do increase it, part of that money comes from state aid and part comes from local property taxes. So the Board of Education and the district has been very judicious on using this local option budget due to the fact that it does cause an increase in property taxes. We don't know for sure what legislative changes will occur this year. At this point in time, it looks like most of the controversial education bills have kind of died in committee or have not passed the House or Senate. So I think, keep our fingers crossed, I think we'll be okay, but we don't know for sure because the session hasn't ended for this year yet. If we want to give salary increases, a 1% increase, which is like a step increase for all employees, equals about $475,000. We don't know if we will have to increase the amount we pay for health insurance or not. That's another area that the district has done really well the last, I'd say last year and a half to 2 years. Our usage has been very good. For the calendar year 2013, our rates have remained fairly stable. We don't anticipate that happening forever. We know they're going to go up again. We just don't know when. And then we also need an upgrade in our technology infrastructure district-wide. This is an item we don't necessarily have to do for next year, but in the near future we need to look at. On our infrastructure in the past, it's not been a part of the technology budget in the past. It's a fairly large item, and in the past we've been able to, gotten savings from E-rate, and we've been able to use that to do significant infrastructure upgrades. Unfortunately, in the future, we don't anticipate getting that E-rate money, as much of it as what we've gotten in the past. So it's something we have to plan for in the future. Another thing we need to plan for in the future is a new activity bus. We currently have 3 activity buses, is that correct? 2 activity buses that take our teams all over the state to various activities. The last time we purchased a bus was in 2006. So our newest bus is 8 years old, so we need to look at getting a new one. Not something we have to do for next year, but something we really need to do in the near future. And then another thing that we need to keep in mind is for this current year and next year, the district has received additional funding for new facilities where, since we have the new high school for a 2-year period, each year for 2 years, the district is receiving an additional $2 million. So that money goes away at the end of next year. So for 2014, 2015, we know we won't have that money, and we need to plan for that money not being here. So, any questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and start with our first presentation, and I believe that's transportation. And each program area will have 15 minutes to give their presentation and answer any questions. We'll kind of monitor that so that any particular area doesn't go over the 15 Dr. Athan mentioned, please feel free to answer any questions or ask any questions that you have. Remember, there are no dumb or stupid questions, so don't be afraid to ask questions. We do ask, though, that you refrain from making editorial comments. An example might be, I'm going to pick on district-wide administration. One of the line items on that is recruiting. The presentation may be that we reduce recruiting expenses. It's perfectly fine to ask what kind of recruiting expenses does the district have, and if you cut recruiting, what do you plan to not do in the future that you're currently doing? It's probably not appropriate to say, in my opinion, I don't think we need to spend any money on recruiting. We can just make phone calls and go online. Okay, so if you start out your question with "in my opinion" or something like that, that's not appropriate. Okay, I think that's it. We'll go ahead and start with transportation. Any questions?
Good evening, I'm Michelle Ersick, and I'm the Director of Transportation. First, I want to start out by thanking my committee members. This year I had Kent Potarf as my community member, and he's in the back row. And then I had Lisa Wild as a classified staff member, and Eric De La Rosa as a certified staff member, Martin Segovia as an extra administrator, Christina Britton as a classified staff member, and then myself. And on the 98%, we would have a package of $2,026,000, which is a difference of $41,348. And going through different things and trying to figure out where we could cut, the only thing that we found we could cut would be 4 route driver positions. Right now we have allotment for 38 route drivers, so that would cut us down to 34. We have a big expense coming up for us this next school year. With our two-way radio system, we have licensing done through the FCC, and they have given an order that everything be made to narrowband, and it was supposed to be done by January 1st of 2013, but our license expires in September, so they've given us until that expiration date to get everything switched over. What that's going to entail is applying for new radio licenses and new frequencies to go narrowband. To do the licenses, it's $950. And then we have to make sure that all the radios in our buses and our base stations are narrowband compatible. So we will have some radios to replace. I don't have a definite number on that yet, but it's roughly 15 radios. And the radios are $450 a piece. So we have moved funds based off of cutting the route positions over to our radios. We were going to increase it by $7,684. And that amount will give us the money that we need to replace all of our radios that we replaced, do the licensing, and still continue with the repair and replacement of radios that we have throughout the year. Then we would need to take $1,500 and put into our out-of-district travel. And what that account pays for is our motor vehicle records, which we run twice a year on all of the transportation department and any of our employees throughout the school district that utilize vehicles on a daily basis. The MVRs are $10 a piece, and currently we run about 72 to 74 MVRs twice a year. And then we put the rest of our funds into our supply tire account. Tires doubled in cost this year, so I'm trying to find what this is probably gonna do for transportation, if we cut route drivers or route positions, it will fill the buses to capacity, which on some of our larger buses are 78 students through a seat. And for high school students, that can be a little crowded. It can affect our discipline and create longer ride times for our students. The routes would be tighter time-wise, which would create some problems, not give us much leeway for inclement weather or maintenance breakdowns. At the 100% budget, we went ahead and cut one route driver position because we still needed to get the funds moved around to cover our radio expense that we have to change over. And also to move the funding over for out-of-district travel to cover the MVRs and the defensive driving. I forgot that part. Defensive driving prices also increased this year. We were given about 30 days notice that effective January 1st, they would go from $3 a person to $10 a person for an 8-hour class. And any of our bus drivers, anybody at transportation has to carry defensive driving, and any district employee that's going to transport students has to carry defensive driving in order to do so. And then, of course, the rest of that back into tires to try and help with the doubling in price there. Any questions?
I have a question about your fuel costs. How do you budget for that since it fluctuates?
Her question is, how do we cover the fuel costs with the fluctuation of prices? Some of our state reimbursement, when we do our state reports, helps with that. We get a discount with the U Pump It gas station next door, which is where we do most of our fueling. And Kathleen's good with money.
We have outside of this program, we have increased the budget
There are no state laws or federal laws that indicate, but we try to stay 45 minutes or less unless they are somebody that lives way out in the country. But we try never to have our students on longer than 45 minutes for a route.
I have one question on tire. We look at 100%,
24,798. His question is on the tires with our 100%. We had 24,944, and with 98, we had 31,763. If we figure out, based on the regular rotation that we try to do our tires with, we would need about 47,000 in the account. Not really sure where to find that money, so that's why I have the boys in the shop trying to find different ways that we can rotate and make those tires last us a little bit longer. And with the 100%, only cutting one position, we didn't have as much fund left over to put over into that.
I was just, I'm thinking long range. If we have more students per bus, which I don't see that changing in the near future, do you foresee a long range need to have cameras on the buses?
Her question is, she's looking at long-term, with more students on the buses, would we be looking into cameras on our buses? I have always said that our discipline has gone pretty smooth and that we don't need cameras. I've been very proud of that, but this year, those things have changed a little. And we have started looking into what it's gonna take to get cameras on our buses. And we don't have all the information gathered, so we haven't started that process with the budget yet.
It's
But
hard to
it's
bring up
something
a
we need to
cost,
look at.
something that costs money when we're talking about cutting, but we
Right.
have to be realistic and we have to consider student safety as well. Have you also considered, like a supervisor, like a parent, someone who would just parole, ride the bus once in a while and help?
And
or-
it's never really come into mind to do something like that. We talked about how it would be nice to have maybe a para or somebody that could ride a bus monitor, but we haven't quite figured out how we would do that without having to pay them and then, of course, increasing the budget.
For your training, because all the bus drivers have to have the difference in $3,000. So the way that somebody got a transportation,
Her question was about defensive driving, and with the increase of the price, is there a way that somebody at transportation who is maybe in charge of training or myself could get certified to give that class? And that's actually something we're looking into through the state to see if they can provide that training, maybe to our driver trainer, where we can do that in-house.
One of our SROs could maybe even offer that.
We could ask them. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All of the school nurses were on the committee, and Sandy Rogers was our community person. And tonight we have 3 of the nurses with us, TCUs. But Nikki Parsons, I started calling Michelle, that's her legal name, and then Megan Spears. So thank you ladies for being here tonight. So we'll get to the ugly, the 98% budget. For health services, that means a cut of over $18,000. When you look at our budget, we do not have very many line items, so that makes it simple to look at. The negative part to that is the only place we could cut is nursing time. So, because you can eliminate all of our line items and still not come up with $18,000. So you have to look at people. So we're looking at cutting 1 nursing position by 0.4. Try to get it as little as we could, and that would be, cut us back to 13.6 nursing positions. We currently have 14 full-time staff nurses. And if you want to look at that, that's 73 nursing days that you're going to be missing out with this budget. I'm not a technology person. Am I hitting the wrong thing, Roxy? All she had to do was stand up. So anybody that has technology problems tonight, just ask Roxy to stand up. One of the tasks that we were charged with was to look at data from previous years to justify your budget. And so that's what this slide is about. You also have that information in your notebook. A lot of people don't realize how busy a nurse's office can be. We have over 7,000 students, but out of 7,000 students, 6,391 of them visited the nurse's office last year. So that's looking at almost 90% of the students coming to the nurse's office for illness, injury, various reasons. But almost 90% of the students come in to the nurse's office at some time during the school year and meet that school nurse. Now, those 6,000 students last year, the total office visits was 45,587 nurses' office visits. These are students coming in for illnesses, injuries, complaints, and meeting a school nurse for some reason. In addition to the 45,000 office visits, we gave over 14,000 medications. Now, medication numbers actually are slightly down from previous years because we've gotten into more long-term type medications, and several of those are given at home. But what we have found as nurses, the medications are getting more complicated. We're having more interactions with different drugs, and so the medications actually are more complicated that we're giving, and we have a concern over some of them with interactions with other medications that maybe they took at home that we don't know about. So that monitoring of that medication is very high priority for the school nurses. In addition to the screenings and in addition to the office visits and medications, we also did the screenings. And you can see we did over 5,000 vision screenings last year, and over 1,000 of those were referred. So all of those referrals then need to be followed up, because as a student, it's very difficult to be successful in school if you're needing glasses or you're needing assistance with that. We did over 4,000 hearing screenings. Only 191 of those needed to be referred, so not quite as many referrals in the hearing as in the vision. And then asthma screenings, this is a collaborative project that we do with St. Catherine Hospital. We do exercise-induced asthma screenings on all of our 5th graders, and so we do that at our 2 intermediate centers. And then we have dental screenings, and we did over 4,000. This is a very high need for our students. Over 3,000 of those students meet referral criteria. Have you ever tried to go to work and have a toothache? Well, we have a lot of students that have dental problems. And so the nurses work very hard at trying to find resources and get those in to get the students some comfort so that they're not as uncomfortable with the toothache. So our screenings are high priority to us. We try to get the majority of them done by first semester so that we can get those needs met. Another thing that the school nurses try to get on within the first day or two, last year we had over 1,000 students that have a known medical alert. Now, a medical alert is something that the parent tells us or that is identified by a physician. And some of those medical alerts are such as diabetes, cystic fibrosis, seizures, transplants, cancer, traumatic brain injury. We have an array of medical alerts out there. But that's, when you think of that prospectively, it's 1 out of 7. So if we go down the line, 1 out of 7 in the first row has a medical alert that the nurses are needing to help do interventions and help meet them with resources in the community to meet those needs so that they can be successful in this classroom. These are some, I got ahead of myself. These are some of the prescribed procedures that we do on a daily basis. We have several students that have these issues. We have a lot of students with asthma. We have students that have trachs that we need to do daily suctioning on several times a day. It's hard to breathe when you are breathing through a tube in your neck. We have students that we need to catheterize. How many times do you go to the bathroom in a day? Well, you know, some of our students need assistance with that. We have students with feeding tubes that we need to give them their feeding through a gastrostomy tube. So we have a lot of those medical conditions in the classroom, and their needs need to be met. The board goals are to have parent relations and create partnerships and be cost effective and provide a safe environment. And I always think of that as a medically safe environment. So when you look at all of those, your best bang for the buck is a good school nurse. I'm totally biased, I will tell you that also. But the nurses meet with their parents. We develop those relationships very closely with our parents, especially with our students that have high medical needs. If you look, the health service budget is about the smallest one. I think there's one smaller than us with the smallest budget. So $18,000 is really pretty small, so just give it to us. And last year, all of the departments got 100% budget, and I thank you for that. I thank the district, I thank the Board of Education. And we did get 100% budget, but I'm a but person, you know. But we also added a high school, we added an early childhood center, but we didn't add any school nurses. And so that means like this year, the nurses are already spread out a little bit more because we have 2 more buildings to cover. So even though we got 100%, we really did not add 2 nurses for the additional buildings and sites that need to be covered. So the last one said questions. So I ask that you consider funding health services 100% budget so that we can keep all 14 school nurses. School nurses are all registered nurses, and so that's important to know that your children are in safe hands. So I'm open to questions. 100% budget, we make no changes. We keep all the nurses and everything the same. The 98% we cut, like I said earlier, we cut 1 nurse by 0.4 4. It's hard, we don't want to cut any nurses in half, so let's not. Any questions regarding our budget? Yes? Most of the Jenny Barker and Pinell get one nurse a week, 1 day a week. And at Jenny Barker, that nurse does 2 half-days. At Pinell, the nurse does a full day on Wednesdays. And
The
then,
secretary acts as the nurse, or who acts as the nurse?
the secretary or whoever can be available. My goal would be to have a full-time nurse in every building. Did I see a hand over here? The audiologist services is contract, and we have a agreement with Liberal School District, so that should be contracted through. The audiologists, those days, we have students who are hearing impaired, and in their IEP, it is written that they have to have an audiology report done on a yearly basis. If we did not do that, then we would have to pay for those students to either go to the Sienna Medical Clinic. So cost effective, it's cheaper for us to do that versus, I'm sorry, I see Victor Hawkins here, versus going to Sienna Medical Clinic because of that cost. The additional days that we have there, the nurses are all trained to do hearing screenings, and they're also trained to do the next level of hearing besides the basic, which is the tympanometry. And when a student fails at that level, they fail both of those screenings, then we don't have enough days. We have to prioritize which ones of those even get to see the audiologist. So we don't even get to see all of the students that are referred for that reason. So that's why we have an audiologist, is for those 2 reasons. And it's important to get that identified so that those students can get preferential seating, or again, the nurse serves as a resource to try to find places to get them hearing aids. It's difficult. The nurses try to do training. We're always available by phone, but that's not the same as being there. And that's the concern of the nurses traveling, because you know, it never happens that you're in the building when the student falls and slices over, you're over in your other school. And so, and then when you talk about 12 miles from town on top of that, it is a concern. So. Then it's on the nurse's license, which is on my license, which is on the school board's license. So it is, by law, we're allowed to delegate certain things. Not everything can be delegated on the nurse's license, but we do train. We train people in CPR, we train them in first aid, then the nurses are available by phone. But it's not the same as a nurse. Putting on a Band-Aid sounds simple, but with the school nurse, they're doing a full evaluation when they're doing that. They're teaching them about good hand washing, they're teaching them about germs, they're doing all of that other part besides just putting on a Band-Aid, so. Joyce?
How many of the 191 are referred for hearing impact to the audiologist?
Well, some of those, there's such a thing as called at-risk, which is, like the 6,000, which is not considered in the educational level. They usually don't get to see unless there's a significant difference. The audiologist can see about 6 or 8 students a day for a full eval. So the hearing impaired students take longer to do a full eval on. So I can't tell you exactly how many we see, but we do about 8. So 8 times 30, 240. But that number doesn't include our hearing impaired kids. Thank you.
I'm Martin Segovia, the athletic director here at the high school, and the activities budget represents grades 7 through 12. Other committee members were Kim Shaddix from the committee, Alice Ortega, class 5, you look at the budget, it looks like the majority of the budget falls under salaries, extra activity salaries, as well as paying people like to marshal and supervise games. So that's the majority of the budget. At 98%, he is proposing to cut the sack lunches from the high school. And the sack lunch budget, I believe, was at about 20,000 on the spreadsheet. At cutting sack lunches from the high school at 98%, that would be a total cost of $18,637. And that would leave roughly $681 to continue sack lunches be provided for the middle schools. So that's how that cost would be made up. In terms of eliminating sack lunches for activities, it could be made up by having parents and students absorb that cost themselves, or asking booster clubs to step in and support providing lunches for students who go on activity events. At 98%, this would not affect any of our CASHA activities or activities that are non-CASHA related, such as cheerleading, dance team, and those things. It does affect students, however, who might depend on a box lunch to get them through an activity or event on a road trip. And that's basically the budget. Any questions at 98%? All right.
Alden, I'm currently a 7th grade social studies teacher at Horace Good Middle School.
My name is Michelle Thompson. I'm a 6th grade teacher at Vernon Beatty Sense. And first, I'd like to thank our committee members for helping us. We had certified staff, Tracy Schellenberger, Joan Nakuda, Michelle Wells, and Ann Jones. Our administrative staff was Vicki Guile, Brad Springston, and Barb Hochschild. Our classified member was Nancy Martinez, and our committee member was Dr. Jerome Green. Okay, we are also going to start with our 98% budget. And what our program entails is basically teachers for communications, reading, math, science, and social studies, and also all encore and elective teachers at both levels. One of our concerns with what we're going to see next year is that we're going to be implementing the Common Core state standards. And with that, there's going to be changes to our instruction. More specifically, we're going to be adding a lot of writing, which is going to add stress to our teachers. Our cut, if we have to cut to 98%, is going to be $157,257. And we're going to kind of talk about the consequences of eliminating this budget, and I'll let Lucas start. He's going to talk about the 7th and 8th grade.
At the middle school level, currently we have 5 teams at Horace Good, and I believe they have 3 teams at Kenneth Henderson. And a team basically is your core teachers, your language arts, your communications, social studies, science, and math teachers. And what Horace Good is going to have to do with the increased number of students and our boundary changes that are going to go into effect with the soft landing and then a hard landing here in 2 years, we are going to be around the 800 student level, and we will have to add a team of core teachers. With that, we've already cut an elective health, so we have 1 position there, and also there'll be 4 more teachers that are going to be needed. And with the budget at 98%, we're going to have to cut 2 teachers. So they're right there at the 6-person staff that we're going to have to either take from the intermediate centers or between KH and Horace Good, however that is figured out. That's going to obviously increase class sizes and maybe discipline problems, things like that. And as Michelle said, as Common Core is coming down the pipe here, the more rigor and relevance that we'll need with Common Core, the more staff members, the more support staff we can have in the classroom, the better off we're going to be, especially sped numbers increasing and things like that. So basically, to try to keep the class sizes even between the 2 middle schools when that final cutoff, I think 800 kids to 400 kids between the two middle schools is what they're thinking. To have that class size, we're going to have to add teachers, but we're going to also have to cut teachers if we don't have the 100% funding. So there lies in the problem.
And with what Lucas said, that they are going to need more teachers at the middle school, it's probably going to be cut from the 5th and 6th grade. And, you know, the Common Core is coming for us, and it's a lot of stress for the teachers, but it's also going to be stress for our students. And increasing class sizes is going to put more stress on them and us. And one thing is that at our level, remediating students is very difficult. They have so many misconceptions, and to remediate them takes a lot more time. Increasing our class sizes is pretty detrimental to kids that do need remediation, and we're making it harder. So we are worried about our students in that way. At our 98% cut, we would be cutting 2 staff members, and we also looked at cutting equipment, which means that we're going to be cutting technology from our buildings. That's the reducing equipment, the $44,000 there. And we're trying to prepare our students to be in a 21st century jobs, careers, and we're going to cut technology, which is an area that they need more support in. So that's a concern for us. Our main focus is we want to keep our class sizes as low as possible. And that relates to the board goal of raising academic success. Again, Common Core is our good news.
At 100%, I believe we have no cuts. So at 100%, we won't be cutting any teaching positions or the technology funding. Is there any questions? I know I can speak for Horace Good. I know we have a grant with Big Brothers Big Sisters that provides like tutoring after school. So that's one community resource that we use. As for parents, I don't know how much the intermediate centers have.
Do matching funds with PTO. Okay, they do matching funds with PTO and anything else. That's it.
They help provide minimally, I mean, what a fundraiser they do, but it's sort of at the
Oh, what did you say? 22 at Horace Good. Can't speak for Cage. I don't know what.
I think it's about the student.
No, 22 right now. Another question?
Do you know how many students that were added to cutting these class sizes?
Well, I know if we don't add another team, it's going to increase it. I don't know if we're at the 800 number. We're talking 4 kids or so, right?
Another 75
So, yeah, you're going to increase class sizes, 2 to 4, I would say.
At our level, I would imagine 2 students per class because
What I would add to the class sizes, it's hard to, when you take at-risk kids, special education, ESL kids, they're formed into specific teams where that support is there. And there's other teams that don't have that. So keeping within guidelines of numbers of support for those areas, other classes end up being more kids in it than classes that have more at-risk kids.
And that is another issue for us, that we don't know what our at-risk funding will be for next year, and that supports a lot of students through Title I and our ESL interventionists and our coaches that are going.
Just a quick question on the technology part of it. Is this the monies for replenishing old outdated equipment, buying new, or combination, or what?
I just gonna be the replenishing of the technologies that we have, combination of both.
We had to decide between that or 3 staff members.
Yeah, that's basically where we got that. To save 1 staff member, we cut the technology. All right, thank you very much.
I'm brand new as a librarian, and Penny and I are both brand new to the budget process, so if we screw this up, just be patient. Our committee, Penny Cruz is our chairperson, and then Donna Kitch is our classified member, Marla Galladay, Karen Blue is our community member, Deb Jarmer is our administrator, Angela Price, Sharon Parks, Jane Richardson, and Carolyn King all work with us to try and figure out where to take money out of the budget. We're going to start by talking a little bit about what librarians do, just because you probably think that we just check out books and shelve them and shush people, and we actually do some more things than that, which I'm just finding out because I'm brand new in this job. So we want you to be involved, so get out your pen. We have a couple of quiz questions. We're going to read them and answer the questions, and then I'll tell you if you're right or not. Okay. So, which of these things, can you read that? Do librarians do in the schools? Do we perform collection analysis and order books? Do we teach students how to use and evaluate online and print resources? Do we locate and share online resources and print materials with teachers? Do we collaborate and team teach with classroom teachers? Or do we gather and check out materials for interlibrary loan? Do we do any of that stuff, all that stuff, some of that stuff? We've got 5 seconds. Ready? Okay, let's see. Oh, look, they all have check marks, but it's a little hard to see. We do all of those things. We analyze what kids are reading. We research new books. We spend our money very, very wisely, only trying to buy things on days that we have free shipping. And we find things online and share them with teachers and with kids. We're trying all the time to get kids excited about reading and excited about using technology in the classroom. And we're working with our teachers, and we're sharing a lot of materials with each other. Every day there are emails going back and forth saying, this school is doing landmarks. What books do you have on that? So that every school doesn't have to have a complete collection, but as a district, whatever we can share saves us all money and makes us work as a team, which is good modeling for the kids. All right, next. How many books are checked out daily across all the schools in the system? 1,235, 22,000, 2,000, or 794? Ready? Go. Which one? You have an answer in your head? It's C. 2,151 books. And if you take the cost of that, just an average cost, $15 a book, that's $33,000 a day of resources that are in kids' hands. Now, how are we going to support this core curriculum? We just heard about teachers are nervous about it, and I'm kind of excited about it. I think that we're really going to get kids thinking and delving into things, and I think it's very exciting. But how are librarians going to help with that? What do we have to do? It's teachers in the classrooms. It's not us. Is that true? How are we going to help? Are we going to assess current library resources and accumulate those necessary to conduct Common Core lessons at each grade level? These are very education-y words. We are going to assist teachers and students in gathering information from print and digital resources. We're going to analyze how 2 or more texts address similar topics in order to compare the approaches the authors take. Assistance to teachers in core curriculum instruction will not be possible. Or integrate and evaluate content presented in diverse media and formats. One of those answers is wrong. Which one? It will absolutely be possible. And librarians and libraries and our resources are really important for that. It can be the hub of the school where everybody can come and work together and find things, and it's very essential. How much would it cost to buy the books in this tub right here? Things like this, there are 20 books in this tub. 50 books, there are 50 books in this tub. How much would it cost to replace that? $250, $500, $750, and $1,000, and I'll say that this is a little bit of a conservative estimate. Got a guess in your head? Okay, $1,000. A good hardback, nonfiction, informational book on a 2nd grade level can cost $22 to $24. And if you have a little guy in 1st grade who likes jets and he wants to read a book about jets, you have to spend $22, I just bought one, for our library on a book like that. But that kind of book will get a 1st grader into the library and reading, and I want to have something there for him to read tomorrow after he reads the book about Jets today. We have to have books if we want kids to read books. Science and technology are the 500 and 600 sections in our nonfiction, and those are pretty modern. It's pretty important that that's current. A technology textbook from 1970s, solar energy at work here. Do you think that anything here has changed since this book came out? Or I really like careers in computers, which is perhaps, I mean, I don't know that we're still building them by hand, but maybe we could just move things over to history. What's the average age of the 500 and 600s in our libraries? Are they 5 years old? That would be pretty good. 25 years old, 16 years old, or 10 years old. Think about it in your head. This is across the district, the average age. So we have some new books, some super old books. What's the average? 16 years. In 1997, we were probably all just starting to use email. So if the average age of our technology books is 1997, that's sad. We got to catch up. Science has made some huge advances, and if we want kids to be excited about science, we need to teach them this science now. Over the last 2 years, media service budget had the largest reduction of all the departments. How big was the reduction? 21%, 5%, 12%, 17%. 21%. That was a pretty big cut. And we're working very hard to work with what we have. Librarians are doing a fantastic job, but just keep that in mind when you're taking money away. During the last 20 years, we've done a lot of research in the United States about libraries. One of these little snippets is not true. When comparing schools with and without librarians, the study indicates that the presence of a qualified school librarian can make a tremendous difference in reading achievement. The difference ranges from 8% for high schools to 35% for elementary schools. Schools with newer collections in their libraries had higher test scores. Elementary schools that spend more on their libraries average almost 10% higher writing performance, and middle schools that invest more in their libraries average almost 13% higher writing levels. School librarians help students acquire unique skills not taught in the classroom and information and technology skills essential for students in the 21st century, because we know that teachers don't have time to do everything, and librarians can fill in some of that gap. In 16 of the 23 studies conducted on the impact of school libraries, it was found that school libraries caused an increase in student test scores. One of those is not true. Ready? Oh, look, it's the bottom one. Actually, in every single study, it was found that having good school libraries caused an increase in student test scores. And we're not focused on tests anymore, but tests are one measure in research of how students are achieving. So, for our 100% budget, we offered no real changes except we had a few days, extra days that librarians have at the beginning and the end of the year to set up their libraries that were going unused. And so we're going to put those into a pool for librarians to use if they get new carpet and they have to move all of their books out and then all of their books back in. So librarians who needed them could draw from that pool. That's the only change to our 100% budget. The 98% budget is fairly devastating. It requires us to cut $22,690 from the budget, and the proposal that was voted on was that we would eliminate the para position that's shared between the two rural schools. We have a half-time librarian at Plymouth and a half-time librarian at Jenny Barker, and a para covers in the other half of the day. That saved us $30,000. We take a little bit of that extra money and give those rural librarians some extra days at the beginning of the school year, and we take the rest of the extra money and put it into books. But because we only have a half-time librarian, if you take away the para, those libraries are closed for half of the day. That means that at Plymouth, when I leave at 11:15, from 11:15 to 3 o'clock, our kids can't check out books. Our teachers can't come to the library and get resources. We can't be working with students. That's incredibly unfair to those kids. It means that kids who check out books in the morning and then read books during independent reading and read books during their reading block, and then want to get a new book to read on the bus on the way home, or read at home, or read to a little brother and sister, which is exactly what we want them to do, they can't come back and get a new book. And, you know, maybe they don't want to read the book about kittens again. They want to get a different book about kittens. They should be able to do that. Students students in those rural schools won't have equal access to resources. We need those parents. We have to keep the library open. But, in just a minute, you're going to see what kids say. At all grade levels, the levels of services regularly provided by the library program are significantly related to student achievement. It is more than ironic that school districts are willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on blah, 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 and boosting test scores, but are unwilling to invest in school library programs that show direct correlation to student success. Let's just put a little bit of money here where we know it's going to work. All right, now let's see what the kids have to say. How do we go back? This is just a pause so that you can think that the books have positively impacted your life. Do you come check out in the morning or the afternoon?
Well, probably once or two times a day. Once or two times a day. Usually, sometimes in the morning and sometimes in the afternoon. Every day. Mostly
What's your very favorite book? Yeah, I like this one too.
Again, check out books. But to check out like any book you want, fiction. I like how there are so many different books that you can pick. If you want an animal book, there are tons of animal books. There are tons of chapter books. Dog books. Being able to check out everything. Getting to read. Yeah, you get to find books that are like good and stuff like that. Books that you get to check out.
I like the big selection of books, but I also like how there's an entire wall for that chapter books and others that
I like the library because, I like reading books, and it makes me feel happy knowing that there's books to read all the time.
That little guy, again, has had kind of a rough road, but he really does check out books. As soon as he finishes one, he's in the library to check out another one, and I know that it means something to him to be able to have a book to take home at night and read. So Stephen Krashen, we all know him. He's a big, important guy, and he says what is clear is that libraries definitely matter, and they matter a lot. So don't take our parents. Let our kids have books. Any questions? Okay, thanks.
My name is Darren Dennis. I'm an assistant superintendent in charge of learning services, and I'll be sharing with you tonight some information about the budget for curriculum and assessment. First, a little bit about what this budget covers, and particularly about the learning services division. Our goal in the department is to support teaching and learning, and we do that through leadership in curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And when you think about schools and the mission of schools, this really gets to the heart of what it is that schools do. So in terms of service, we have instruction and curriculum as one of our major areas of focus. And the Common Core, you've heard Common Core come up a couple of times already tonight, and how important that is, and what a major change and shift that will be for our instruction in this district, the level of rigor that will be expected of students, the kinds of instruction that it will take to get students to that level. That doesn't just happen. It happens because of the support and the professional development that we can provide to our staff. We're also involved in helping to bring systemization to our process, to our instruction, so that we are more consistent and more effective with students in the classroom. And that's playing out through a transformation initiative that we're in the process of implementing. I've mentioned professional development as well, and that's another area of focus for the department. We also are in charge of assessments, and not only the Kansas assessments, which get a lot of the headlines, but also assessments that help measure students' progress along the way, to screen how kids are doing and help determine what needs to be done to follow up with those students to make sure that they are on track. We also, as part of this budget, have the Teacher Resource Center, which is at the ESC. It is the center that Geneva Minter runs, and she has a lot of materials in there that are very popular with teachers, and is a recruiting tool as well for new teachers coming to the district. We're involved in curriculum writing, in other words, helping to establish what it is that's taught. Those are reviewed on an annual basis, and it takes time, effort, and money to have people review those. We're involved in the MTSS process, multi-tiered system of supports. That is a system that helps those students that we've screened. We try to make sure that those kids get the support they need in order to catch up with their peers. Reading is obviously a very important part of this, but we also support the other curricular areas, math, writing, science. We do that in a variety of ways. One way we do that is through instructional coaching, literacy coaches, math coaches, who help provide that ongoing job-embedded professional development that research says is the most effective way for professional development to be delivered. We support, through that professional development, differentiated instruction, which means meeting the needs of every individual kid where they are and helping them to progress and move forward. My Learning Plan is the system that we use to monitor professional development, to keep track of it, so that we can, it's not only for teachers to get licensed, but also for us to keep track of what are the most important topics out there that we need to keep on top of. Here's our request, or our proposal rather, for a 98% budget. At 98%, we need to decrease by, there it is, a little over $16,800. And we do that by reducing several items. The first one is under the salary item, Salary Curriculum CC, which stands for Cost Center. Buildings get a certain amount of money per teacher that goes into the Cost Center budget. They use that at the secondary level for department heads who coordinate the efforts of the departments. We also would reduce curriculum development. This is the wrong time to decrease curriculum development. But it's what we have to do here to get to our $16,888. We reduce in-service for certified staff. And we do that at a time when Common Core is headed our way. We also reduce buildings' ability to provide in-service because we have to cut back their budget as well. That budget comes in, as I said, a little over $16,800. At 100%, there are no changes to the current budget. As you're thinking about this tonight and framing your decision about how we should prioritize these budgets, I want you to keep, though, in mind Common Core as a major theme, and you've heard it several times tonight. You will hear it, I don't doubt at all, you'll hear it several times more. But that is a really major, important thing that's happening in the field of education, and it's what this department does to support teaching and learning. We do that through professional development. So all of that, I want you to please keep in mind as you're thinking about your decision tonight, and I would open it up to questions. Yes? Good question. Newton Church Camp was the question, and I think it's $3,000. There is a church camp, and I don't remember which church it is, but every year they have a camp, and it spans September 20th. And for those of you who are not in the education profession, September 20th is our count day. That's when the state counts our students, and that sets our budget for the year. That money, that $3,000, pays for some substitutes that we hired in Newton. Newton, Kansas is where the camp is. So we hire subs to deliver curriculum to those kids so that we can count them on our rolls, and we get credit for those kids. What we get in return is quite a bit more than the $3,000 we spend to be able to collect, to claim them. Good question. Thank you.
Not only with students on IEPs, but also kids in the general education. We have school psychological services, which again cross into regular ed as well as in special education. We have a liaison in my department that works with area mental health because we have a lot of students with mental health needs. And of course, they're in our schools, and so we track how they're doing in school and report back to AMH. We do staff development. We assist special ed ELL students, so kids that fall into both categories. We do SAT support and involvement, which we still have SAT student assistance teams, but we're now also going into the multi-tiered system of supports and have staff that work with that. We have a lot of instructional materials that we provide. We have a lot of technology and equipment that we purchase versus the technology department doing that. And we assist the schools in times of crisis. Thankfully, we haven't had a lot of that this year. Who do we serve? We serve students from ages 3 to 21. That is federally mandated that we pick up students as they turn 3 coming from Russell Child Development, as well as do a monthly community screening where we pick up any child between the ages of 3 and 5 and have those students at the Early Childhood Center now. We serve every building in this district. We serve all private schools in town. We serve Head Starts. We have home-based students, and we do the community preschools for students that have disabilities. At our 98% budget, it's hard to see, we will cut 2 teaching positions and 3 paraeducators. Obviously, making those cuts impact a lot of things for the district. They impact the ability to have some rigor and relevance for students with disabilities. We're going to have fewer staff members to help with that. We're not going to be able to be as inclusive, possibly for students, which we are required to serve students in the least restrictive environment, which means the general education classroom as much as possible. But we also have to support them in there. And that continuum of services goes from that to a resource where they're just pulled out for part of their day, to what we call self-contained classrooms. We also have students on homebound services at this point. Those are our very medically fragile students that if they come to school sometimes, especially during the winter months, they get sick very easily, end up in the hospital, those types of things. In addition to cutting the 2 teaching positions and the 3 paras, we have to cut some from our salary for the student aides, and that is for our students here generally at the high school who are working on job-related skills, and they can get paid a little bit of money to help them develop those skills so that they can go on into the community and have some job training already behind them. We also would cut $5,000 from other student services, just as one of kind of a catch-all for everything. We will cut $2,500 from our supplies for our more severe kids, trainably mentally handicapped, severely mentally handicapped students. We will cut $100 from postage. We will cut $3,722 from equipment, $3,500 from repair and maintenance of equipment, $100 from the telephone, and then we have a miscellaneous account of $22,288 that we will cut for a total of $222,555. So 222,555 is what we had to cut. At the 100% budget, we aren't going to have any changes from what we're doing. We'll just try to keep going. And like everybody else has said, even at 100%, that's still a cut every year as you try to maintain services and budgets for personnel, equipment, all those types of things. Okay. Pretty cut and dry. Any questions? I have one retirement that we are going to be covering. My gifted facilitator at the high school is going to cover grades 5 through 12 for our gifted services. Worked with the high school staff, administration, and him and middle school principals and intermediate principals, and that's one of them. The other one, not quite sure. We'll see who leaves the district and then how I can redistribute staff. Generally, those cuts come, James, close yours, from high school simply because they have the largest staff. Other questions? Wow. You guys are easy.
Good evening, Mr. McClellan. I'm Deputy Superintendent. My responsibilities are the day-to-day operations of the district and our Human Resources and Personnel Office. The district-wide administration committee was made up of Victor Hawkins, a community member, Christopher Neighbors, he's a teacher at the Alternative Education Center, Rebecca Parton's a classified staff member in the district, Dr. Atha and myself. What does our budget cover? Primarily the district-wide administration budget covers the superintendent's office, the business office, the personnel office, and our public information office. To give you some examples of kind of what happens out of those different offices, the Board of Education, of course, makes all the policy decisions for our district, and that happens through the superintendent's office and the clerk of the board. We're responsible for recruiting and hiring staff, for staff evaluation, to deal with legal issues, employee benefits, payroll, paying the bills, developing the budget. So the time, the effort, the expense to conduct this process is something that happens as a result of the district-wide administration budget. Some specific services that you'll see in the budget, copies for the Educational Support Center and copies for the rest of the district. Every building is allocated, I believe, 5 copies per student per day, and those go through our district copy center. Recruiting for our certified staff goes through the personnel office, so that pays for things like going to teacher recruitment fairs, for developing promotional materials, expenses for bringing candidates in for face-to-face interviews. When we have a candidate that's considering moving to Garden City, we really feel it's important that they come here and they experience Garden City before they choose to accept a position with us. We really don't want them to, we want to interview them over the phone and they take a position here and come to Garden City, and the first day they're disappointed that they chose Garden City because they've never been here before. So, and also we provided signing bonuses for our new employees through this budget. We have staff development for our Board of Education and our central office administration included here. Our legal services, our audit the district is mandated to do yearly, our liability insurance. Substitutes in the district use a system called SubFinder that makes our process for assigning subs more efficient. We're required to do background checks on any of our new employees that haven't had a recent background check. That's paid for. The district has some postage expenses, telephone expenses, and then supplies that we pay out of this budget. So how will we accommodate a 98% cut? And I might just throw in there, it's always easy to talk about cutting district-wide administration. And if you look back to one of the pages that Kathleen gave you early on that shows where everybody's been funded, one of those first section handouts, district-wide administration's been funded at 98% or less 10 out of the 16 years that we went through this process. So not only in a year where you get your 100% budget, you don't get to account for inflation like Dr. Johnson mentioned, this budget's taken cuts more than any other budget that's considered in the process. Our proposed cuts would first be to reduce our legal services by $5,000. We're basing that off of what we project our actual expenses to be. We'll also reduce supplies for the Board of Education supplies, the Superintendent Office supplies, the Public Information Office supplies, and the Personnel Office supplies. Each of those takes anywhere from a $500 to $1,000 cut in their supply budgets. We'll reduce our telephone expenses by $18,000, and the reason we can do that, Kathleen mentioned E-rate. We get a discount on our telephone bill through E-rate, so we've actually got some flexibility there to reduce that line item. It won't change the telephone services that we provide in the district. It won't make any difference in the services we do. We also will reduce our copy expenses for the buildings by $9,000. That will all come from Garden City High School. The high school this year implemented a one-to-one laptop initiative, and they have reduced their number of copies that they require because of that technology. And I've talked to James, back me up on this, James. I've talked to James, and James has agreed that they could accommodate. That'll basically cut their allocation of copies in half at the high school. And then we'll reduce our teacher recruitment expenses by $5,000. And what will that mean? I'll answer Kathleen's question that she asked. What will that mean? That will mean we will probably go to a fewer recruiting fairs next year because we think it's important that we continue to bring candidates in and we continue to make those contacts. We'll just have to find a way to do it with going to a fewer fairs. At 100%, our budget will remain the same. One other thing that I want to point out to you, in 2011, Shelley Kiblinger left our district, and when Shelley was a central office administrator, whose salary was paid out of this budget. When Shelley left that position, we didn't refill her position. So the workload that happens at the central office was redistributed among those of us that were left. So that didn't go through program budgeting, but that was a change that affected the district-wide administration budget. Also, in 2012, the assessment coordinator and our coordinator of secondary education moved to an assistant principal role in this building, and we didn't refill that position. So again, those responsibilities now have been shifted back to the ESC. Now that position was not paid for out of the district-wide administration budget. That was paid for, I think, out of curriculum, Dr. Dennis's budget. But I think it's important that this group understand that there have been position cuts that have happened, and there has been a redistribution of the workload that needs to go along with what happens at the central office. Questions?
Do you need to offer a signing bonus to be competitive?
Yes, we do need to offer a signing bonus to be competitive, and it's also an item that's a negotiated item. So in order for us to eliminate that, that would have to be agreed upon in negotiations. But honestly, if we should be doing anything with our signing bonus, we should be increasing it. I think we've had a $500 signing bonus probably for 15 years, I would guess. Not that long? Yeah. Okay. I know Jim Lentz got that in place when he was here, and he's been gone out of deputy superintendent role for 10. He's been gone from the district for 8. So between 10 and 15. Yes, ma'am. Civic dues and fees pay for, they pay some of the reimbursement for the central office administrators when they participate in groups like Lions Club, Rotary, that kind of thing. There's a certain amount that we're reimbursed up to. Can I speak to the necessity of recruiting out of state? Absolutely. We will hire anywhere from 60 teachers in a slow year to close to 100 in a busy year. Historically, the number of people that we hire from in-state is about half of the total number of teachers that we hire. This year, we have tried to go back to more in-state recruiting fairs. We had kind of cut some of those out due to budget issues in the past. We tried to pick that back up again, so we're going to not only Wichita State, K-State, KU, Pittsburgh State, Fort Hays, but we're also doing some of the smaller private fairs as well as Northern Colorado, Panhandle State, some of them that are reasonably close to us in neighboring states. We always want to try to hire local people when we have qualified candidates. We think that our chances of retaining those people is better than if we bring somebody in from out of state. However, if that's all we relied upon, we would not have near the percentage of filled vacancies that we have. We probably, on an average year, hire 20 to 30 teachers from the Michigan, Minnesota area. And we've been fortunate the economy's kind of poor in those areas, so we have a lot of young people who this is a great opportunity for them to come to Kansas, and they get a lot of support in our district. But what we find is some of them come and stay, but a lot of them come and get some experience and then want to move back closer to family, closer to home. And so we don't have the long-term retention with those people as much as with our in-state folks. What kind of pay raises do the teachers get? Well, depends. What Kathleen shared this year was that on our salary schedule, every year that people work, there's somewhere between a $300 and a $500 a year increment. That is kind of what we call maintaining the salary schedule. So if they've taught here 12 years, they move down to step 13 kind of thing. That takes about 1% to do that for the teachers and for the longevity pay for all of our classified employees. And pay raises really aren't part of this process. Pay raises also go through negotiations. And pay raises, we didn't have the authority to give everybody on our budget a raise. Or middle school instruction presented earlier, they didn't have the authority to say, we're going to give our teachers a 1% raise or a 5% raise. That happens outside of what we do here. Now, historically, in the last 4 years, last year we gave a 3% raise. The 2 years prior to that, we gave a 1% raise. We basically maintained the salary schedule. Last year was the first year in 3 years that we had given anything other than maintaining that salary schedule. Okay, great question.
Okay, I don't remember how many years. I think at 11. But anyway, we've never increased it, correct?
Signing bonus? Correct. Yeah, it started out at 500 and it's remained at 500.
What do most schools offer?
It varies. Some schools have a higher base, but they don't pay much for insurance. We have a pretty good insurance benefit. When you take our insurance and our base pay and our career earnings, we are normally around right in the top 25% in the state of Kansas. But folks, look at our geography. We have to be competitive to compete and attract people to come here. So that's always been a priority of ours, is to try to maintain a competitive salary schedule for our certified staff in order, because it doesn't matter how you add it up. The most important thing in a kid's education is their classroom teacher. And if we don't have great teachers, we're not going to have great schools. So that is a big priority for us.
Throughout this evening, we've heard a lot of departments comment on, in order to make a 2% cut, we're going to be in the people. And could you just mention a little bit about how we use attrition to avoid terminating people and keeping our current staff?
Sure. One of the things that we've never had to do, I've been in the district 25 years, and we've never had to implement our reduction in force policy. And our reduction in force policy would go into effect if we had to cut 5 teachers and we didn't have any open positions. Then we would have to select 5 people that we'd say, you don't have a job next year. We've never had to do that because one of the benefits of hiring 60, 70, 80 people a year is that when we do have positions that we have to cut, we try at all costs to cut those positions through attrition. So people who have left, those are the jobs we don't fill. Or if that's not a job that has to be cut, we might have to transfer somebody from a job maybe that they really like into a job that they don't like so much, but at least they have a job in order to make the system work. So we haven't had to RIF, we haven't had to do reduction in force. We do put a priority on solving those problems through attrition. But it's going to become increasingly difficult to do that. As you're seeing, these programs are getting tighter and tighter, and many of the programs that we've heard from, and some more that we probably will hear from, are talking about having to cut positions. I do think we'll be able to go this year without having to RIF. I don't think we'll have to let anybody go because of cost-cutting measures. But as we continue down this road of making cuts and becoming leaner and leaner, it's going to get tougher and tougher to continue to do that.
Exactly what Dr. Carl mentioned is the exact truth. When it's referred to the certified teachers and the classified those. But in the administrative area, we have had to cut one administrator and look them in the eye and tell them they didn't have a job. All of the other administrative cuts have been through attrition. So if at all possible, we wanted to our cuts
I would suggest you don't really pay attention to the salary, because what we deal with is more positions. Okay, so, right, I mean, the new person's salary is not necessarily reflected in that document, but what we have is we have a financial officer position. We're not gonna cut that, we're not gonna add and have two, although maybe we need to. Kathleen's done a great job, so, but again, that's the same kind of thing, when you're looking at the middle school instruction budget, we don't get into what the specific individual teacher salaries are. We talk about we have X number of teaching positions, and they can either add to that if they want to take their equipment money and buy teachers instead, or they can subtract if they have to make their budget work.
Due to that, we're not anticipating much of an increase next year. And then we also have the local option budget that we can increase. But if we do that, we have to increase property taxes at the same time. So those are our three sources of revenue. On the expenditure side, we look at program budgeting, whether we have increases or cuts. We look at salary increases. And I guess those are salary increases, and then program budgeting, and whether we go into the local option budget or not.
My name is Mary Guinan, and I am the counselor at Horace Good Middle School, and today I will be presenting the counseling budget. I would like to thank our committee members, Bridget Ramsey, who is here, who is our community member, and Christy Botts, who's our principal, and I would like to thank our other members for helping with this process. Okay, a day in the life of a counselor. A typical day, a day is never typical, but what I did this year is I asked all of our counselors to write down a day, and I used one of the counselors just to kind of share with you what we do. And first of all, at 7, arrive and prepare for the day. 7:15, email and prepare passes. 7:45, compare compass testing for Garden City Community College. 8:30, contact parent of student with cutting issues. 9, change schedule for new student who lost a parent. 9:15, meet with potential new student and parent. 9:30, meet with student not attending night school, hall duty. 10:30, answer phone messages and emails. Work on credit checks and enrollment at 11. 11:40 is lunch duty. 12:10, a Facebook situation. Work with our security resource officer. 1 o'clock, met with parents of a student involved in a fight. 2 o'clock, counseling meeting. 2:30, met with student involved in a fight. 3:10, assist secretary with grades. 3:20, answer emails. And 3:30, consult with teachers at the Garden City Alternative Education Center. And 4 o'clock, go home. Okay. At our 100% budget, we currently have 20 counselors for pre-K through 12. We have materials for elementary, intermediate, and middle schools. And we have extra days for high school, middle school, and intermediate counselors. Now, at 98% budget, we would have to decrease 1/2 counseling position. And when we say that, the reality of it is, to find a half of a counselor would be hard. And so my concern is, just like all the other budgets, we have trimmed the fat. All that is left are people. And my concern is finding a half of a counselor. I feel like that the reality is that we would not find that, and maybe we would consequently lose a whole counselor by that cut. So when you're considering voting today, I want you to think about that. And what are the consequences of this cut? Currently, students at Garden City Alternative Education Center, the Options, and Garfield Early Childhood Center will not be adequately served. We have counselors that are kind of assigned to the schools and go over when there's help needed, but there are not counselors at those 3 areas. Counselors will still have excessively high student-to-counselor ratios. And as our district transitions from No Child Left Behind to Common Core, Our students will be faced with a more rigorous curriculum. Those students whose emotional and social needs are not met will be negatively impacted in their academic achievement. Okay. Any questions? Yes?
What's the option?
The options is located on Zara Road, and what would be a good description of the options? There's for
Alternative school, and it's generally, a lot of times the students that have been in trouble and they need a different learning environment, and sometimes it's not necessarily that they've been in trouble, they just struggle with learning environments that are. We have, I believe we have some students that go through the justice system, and that may be a requirement that they attend the option. So it's incorporation of that program in order to come back to our place. If we have students that are suspended long-term from school, that's an option that they have available to them to attend the option. It's incorporation with the Benton County juvenile justice system. It's an option,
sometimes for
clarification, sorry.
yes. That would be a Kathleen question.
We do have, at the high school, we have one counselor who is bilingual, and he serves mostly bilingual students at the high school, so he's funded under the bilingual fund.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Director of Plant Facilities. Plant Facilities is in charge of all the maintenance, construction, grounds, in charge of the custodial services and the warehouse. I don't have a presentation up there, so I'll have you follow along in your books. A 2% cut in our budget would require about $103,000 cut, and as with everybody else goes, most of our cuts will have to come in personnel. Most of the items down and toward the bottom are supplies and contracted services and things that we go through to keep up the buildings and do everything we have to. We reviewed all our positions and to see what we could do. We currently have 4 painters, and we thought that we could probably get by with 1 less painter. The biggest impact on this district with losing 1 painter would be we have a rotational schedule on the buildings, painting interior and exterior, and it's about a 7-year rotation. It'll probably move that to closer to 9 years to completely redo those. One of our most important things is getting out and taking care of graffiti. That's one of the first things we do, and that will continue. And other things that are really serious we get to paint. The things that we will, besides the rotational, that we may have to forego would be maybe parking lot, the stripes on the parking lots, and maybe some of the playground equipment, getting some of that repainted. Just kind of depends on how they deteriorate and how they go. But that's probably the biggest impact we have on that. We would either handle this through attrition, but with only 4 people, that may not happen, but we do have an opening in grounds, and we may hold that until we decide whether we have to do something, and maybe able to move that in there. Custodial was our next area that we looked at real closely, and we tried to see how many custodians we need, and really, where can you cut? We have people working everywhere. We looked at all the buildings by the square footage, and that isn't always cut and dry. Different buildings have different needs. The high schools and the middle schools have a lot more activities, and so we have to work through all that. Some schools, like the 2 country schools, only have 1 custodian, and we have to have somebody there all day. So there are things we have to take into account. That we have about 7 positions or buildings that have a custodian for 4 hours, most of them along with other custodians. And we evaluated those, and we found 4 that by taking
away the 4-hour person, the square footages kind of even out. It definitely will be a detriment to them to lose if they have one night custodian and a half a position. It's going to put more onto the daytime than the other position. But these are the 4 that we identified. We probably with special needs would have to pick those up with our substitute custodians. This has been a very unusual year. We've had multiple sicknesses. Fortunately, they haven't been workers' comp. We've had a couple of those, but we've had quite a few people off on extended long-term illnesses. And we've had to cover those with the substitute custodians, and we've been short day after day after day. And a lot of these positions we're looking at now, they've been doing without through most of the year just because of the other shortages. So they can manage, but if you ask any of them, they're going to tell you that they can't do everything they want. Our goal is to do all our cleaning in all our buildings every day. And there are days when we run short that we have to leave some things. Primarily, we look at the restrooms, we look at emptying the trash, we look at disinfecting the tabletops, especially in the grade schools. And then we try to do everything else that we can. So it will have an impact. You may not see it, others may, but we do everything we can to keep up with the cleaning for our students. We looked at the maintenance and the groundskeeping, and we just think that we would have a lot of other things gone undone, which would affect you getting our lights done, our heating, and other things of that nature. So by cutting the painter and basically 2 custodians, or we're looking at 4 half-time positions, we're probably not cutting 4 people. A lot of our schools that have half-time, the person works in 2 buildings. We have a retirement coming up. Next month, we pull that position if we have to. And so this would only affect 1 person, and we hope that by attrition, we won't have to let anybody go. We may be able to move somebody. We definitely hope we don't have to let somebody go and not have another job for them. With those changes, it leaves us $10,000 that we want to put into our substitute custodian fund to try to have an extra substitute custodian to fill in. With 100%, we would make no changes. But like everybody says, we get a cut because of inflation and everything else that goes on. We've had a lot of compliments in this district on the condition of our buildings. We had an engineer come out in Wichita to look at the project, and he went to one of our oldest schools, Sandy Wilson, and he said they have schools in Wichita that are 2 or 3 years old that look in worse condition than our schools. So I think we can be proud of what we have and the care that's given, and we want to maintain that. That I think for the comfort, for the looks, everything, it is good for our children. Are there any questions?
When you're short those 4-hour custodians, does Polly's job increase?
I'm sorry?
Do you have more sick kids?
Oh, more sick
when you're
kids?
short?
Do you? Good, very well. So, we get into the flu season, we not only do we look at just trying to disinfect the tabletops, we try to have the custodians go around and do all the doorknobs, everything else they possibly can. And you take a school with 1.5 positions at night, as some of our grade schools are, you take that half position away, that's a lot of extra work for that person. So we will try to do the disinfecting. The floor may not get swept completely, they'll hit the bad spots,